The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. The hum of the ceiling fans mixed with the shuffle of papers and the distant tick of the courtroom clock. An old man stood in the defendant's place, hands trembling, head bowed. His clothes were torn, his coat faded and his shoes mismatched and barely holding together. Judge Harrison looked at him for a long moment, studying his tired eyes. "Mr. Walter Briggs," the judge began, "you are accused of trespassing and vandalizing city property. Do you understand the charges?" The old man didn't answer immediately. His lips trembled, but no words came. The bailiff nudged him gently. Walter nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the floor. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this man was found sleeping inside the city's war memorial, the one recently renovated with taxpayer money. He broke the gate lock and left food wrappers and a blanket inside. This is a blatant act of vandalism." Gasps rippled through the small audience, but the judge didn't react. He kept his gaze fixed on Walter, as if trying to read the years written on his face. The old man finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean no harm, sir. I just needed a place to rest." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "You broke the lock, Mr. Briggs." Walter's lips quivered. "It wasn't locked when I found it. I swear it. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Sweet Justice, where real emotion meets the courtroom. Each story here reminds us that behind every case, there's a human story waiting to be told." The judge sighed softly and looked at the prosecutor. "Go on." The prosecutor began pacing. "Your Honor, this isn't the first time this man's been caught loitering around the memorial. He's been warned multiple times by city security. He refuses to leave. He sleeps there, eats there, sometimes even talks to the statues. He's disrupting public property." A few people in the audience chuckled quietly. The judge's gavel struck. Bang! "Silence in my courtroom," he commanded, eyes narrowing. Then turning back to Walter, he asked gently, "Mr. Briggs, why that place? Why not a shelter?" Walter hesitated. His eyes welled up. "Because that's where my boys are, Your Honor." The courtroom froze. The judge frowned. "Your boys?" Walter nodded slowly. "Their names are on that wall." For a moment, no one moved. The prosecutor lowered his pen. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned back, voice softer now. "Are you saying the memorial is for your unit?" Walter nodded again. "Charlie Company, Vietnam, 1969. We were 20 strong when we went in. Only 4 of us came back, the rest. Their names are there. I go there to remember." A heavy silence filled the room. The judge's face softened, but he quickly masked it with composure. "And why didn't you seek help, Mr. Briggs?" "There are programs for veterans." Walter looked down at his cracked hands. "Tried, sir. But the waiting lists were long. They said come back next month. Next month turned into next year. Then I just stopped asking." The judge looked down at the file in front of him. It was thin, too thin for a man with so much pain behind his eyes. The prosecutor adjusted his tie, uncomfortable now. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this man still broke the law. Compassion is admirable, but rules are rules." The judge didn't reply. He stared at Walter for a long time, then finally said, "Mr. Briggs, I want to understand your story. We'll take a short recess. Bailiff, bring the defendant a glass of water." As Walter sat down, his frail body shaking, the judge's eyes followed him. Not as a criminal, but as a man who once wore a uniform with pride. The courtroom doors closed softly after the recess announcement. A few minutes later, Judge Harrison sat in his private chamber, staring out the window. The sound of distant traffic filled the silence, but his mind was still replaying Walter's words. "That's where my boys are." The judge rubbed his temples. He had seen countless defendants in his career, thieves, liars, broken souls, but there was something in Walter's eyes that haunted him. Not guilt, not fear, just loss. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. His clerk, Maria, entered holding a thin file. "Your Honor, I pulled up Mr. Briggs's record. It's quite something." Judge Harrison gestured for her to sit. "Go ahead." Maria flipped through the pages. "Walter Briggs, age 73. Served in the U.S. Army, deployed to Vietnam in 1968. 2 tours. Received a Bronze Star and Purple Heart, honorably discharged." The judge frowned. "And after the service?" Maria hesitated. "That's where it gets sad. He lost his wife in 1985 to cancer. His only son, killed in a car accident 3 years later. After that, no steady employment. He lived off odd jobs, then disappeared from all official records about 20 years ago. No criminal record until now. The judge sighed deeply. And now he's here. For sleeping beside the names of his fallen brothers. Maria's voice softened. Sir, there's more. He used to visit the memorial every Veterans Day. Volunteers from the Veterans Association say he'd sit there for hours, sometimes talking to the names on the wall. They said he used to clean the marble with his own handkerchief. Judge Harrison closed his eyes for a moment, his throat tightening. He had lost his own father to the Vietnam War, a man he barely remembered but respected deeply. And now, this veteran, broken and forgotten by the very country he served, was being treated as a criminal. When court resumed, the air felt different. The people had returned, chatting quietly, unaware of the storm of emotions gathering behind the judge's calm eyes. Court is back in session, the bailiff announced. Walter stood once more, his frail hands clutching his cap, the same old army cap he'd been wearing since his arrest. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. Mr. Briggs, I've reviewed your record. You served with distinction. You risked your life for this country. Walter looked up, surprised. I just did what I was told, sir. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, while we all respect his service, this case isn't about his past. It's about the present offense, the judge interrupted firmly. Mr. Carlson, sometimes the past explains the present better than any law book ever could. The audience murmured in agreement. Tell me something, Mr. Briggs, the judge continued gently. Why didn't you tell the officers who you were? That you were a veteran? Walter looked down. Didn't seem to matter anymore. People look at me and see a drunk, a bum, a burden. Nobody cares about medals when you're sleeping on the street. The judge's fingers tightened around his pen. The prosecutor spoke again, softer this time. Your Honor, perhaps we could arrange a plea deal. Maybe probation, Walter interrupted, shaking his head. Don't want pity, sir, just wanted one quiet night by my friends. That's all. The courtroom fell silent again. In the front row, a young man in a military uniform, a sergeant, raised his hand. Your Honor, may I say something? The judge nodded. State your name for the record. Sergeant Alex Miller, U.S. Army, sir. My father served with Charlie Company. His name's on that wall, too. I know who this man is. A ripple of surprise spread through the audience. Go on, Sergeant, the judge said. Alex stood proudly. Mr. Briggs saved my father's life in Vietnam. I grew up hearing his name. He pulled 3 men from a burning transport under fire. If not for him, I wouldn't even be standing here. The room erupted in whispers. The prosecutor looked stunned. Walter's eyes widened, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. I had no idea your father. Walter stammered. Alex nodded. He talked about you every year, sir. He said you were the bravest man he ever knew. The judge took a deep breath, visibly moved. He turned to the prosecutor. Mr. Carlson, do you still believe this man is a public nuisance? Carlson looked down, ashamed. No, Your Honor. I withdraw the complaint. The judge nodded slowly, emotion flickering across his face. Then I suppose we are not here to punish Mr. Briggs, but to remember what justice truly means. He looked directly at Walter. Mr. Briggs, this court owes you more than you owe it. You will not spend another night on the street. I'll personally contact the Veterans Outreach Program. They'll get you housing, health care, and whatever support you need. Walter's lips trembled. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. The judge leaned forward. Say nothing. Just promise me you'll visit that memorial in the daylight. Not to sleep, but to live. A soft applause broke out in the courtroom. Even the bailiff smiled, wiping his eyes discreetly. Walter stood there, saluting weakly, the gesture shaky but filled with pride. The judge returned the salute quietly from the bench. The courtroom was still buzzing after the judge's declaration. Some people were still wiping away tears, others whispering to one another, astonished at what they had just witnessed. Judge Harrison remained seated, his gavel resting quietly beside him. The usual formality of the courtroom, the stiff rules, the impersonal tone, felt distant now. In this moment, it was not a place of law, but a place of humanity. He glanced at Walter again. the old soldier still standing, hat clutched to his chest. His frail body seemed lighter somehow, as if the burden of decades had been lifted in a single moment. "Mr. Briggs," the judge said softly, "before I deliver my final ruling, I want to ask you one more question." Walter looked up. "Yes, sir." "When you stood before that memorial, what were you thinking?" Walter hesitated. Then with a trembling voice he said, "I was thinking. I made it home when they didn't. I was thinking how unfair that was. Every night I close my eyes and I still see their faces, sleeping beside them. It made me feel less alone." The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Harrison took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried not just authority, but empathy. "Mr. Briggs, you may have come into this courtroom as a defendant, but you stand before us as a hero. This court finds you not guilty on all charges." Gasps and soft applause filled the air, but the judge wasn't done. He leaned forward, his tone solemn yet warm. "There are many kinds of crimes in this world. Some are written in law books. Others are written in neglect, in forgetting the people who gave everything for this country. Today, this courtroom will correct one of those wrongs." He looked toward the prosecutor. "Mr. Carlson, I expect the city to formally dismiss this case and arrange immediate support from the Veterans Outreach Department. If necessary, I'll personally sign the order." Carlson nodded quickly, his earlier arrogance replaced by humility. "Yes, Your Honor, it'll be done today." The judge turned to Walter. "Mr. Briggs, the court will also see to it that your service record is restored and honored properly. You've carried the weight of too many ghosts for too long. It's time you rest, not on cold concrete, but in peace." Walter's lip trembled as he whispered, "Thank you." "Thank you, sir," the judge smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Thank the law for remembering its heart." Then, as if something compelled him beyond his duty, the judge slowly stood up, an act that startled the entire room. Judges rarely rise for defendants, but this wasn't a defendant anymore. This was a soldier. Judge Harrison stepped down from the bench, walked across the courtroom, and extended his hand. Walter looked at it for a moment, then took it, shaking it with the same dignity he had shown in his youth. The entire courtroom rose in silence. The bailiff, a former Marine himself, stood at attention and saluted. One by one, others followed. The sergeant, the prosecutor, the spectators, even the clerk. The old man stood in the middle of them all, trembling, tears glistening on his cheeks. Surrounded by respect he thought he'd never feel again. The judge turned to the courtroom audience and spoke, his voice steady and commanding, "Let today be remembered. Justice is not blind. It sees beyond the uniform, beyond the mistakes, beyond the years. It remembers those who served, those who lost, and those we almost forgot." He raised his gavel one last time and said, "Case dismissed, with honor." The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, a final salute to a life of sacrifice. Later that evening, as the courthouse lights dimmed, Walter walked out with Sergeant Miller by his side. The city air was cold, but for the first time in years he felt warm. They stopped by the war memorial on the way out. The marble gleamed under the streetlights. Walter reached out and touched one of the engraved names. "Welcome home, boys," he whispered. "I finally made it too." A single tear fell, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from peace. In the distance, the courthouse clock struck midnight. The judge stood by the window of his chamber, watching Walter disappear into the night, not as a broken man, but as a soldier finally free. He whispered quietly to himself, "Sweet justice."